What if I told you the modern world didn't just happen? It was built by nations that rose from war, united through vision, and reshaped the planet forever. America, Britain, and Europe. Three forces that turned chaos into civilization and power into progress. This is how the West created the world we live in. Empires are not born in peace. They rise through fire, ambition, and the relentless pursuit of power. The Western Alliance was not an agreement on paper, but a force forged through centuries of struggle and survival. From the ashes of ancient empires came three powers that would shape humanity's destiny: America, Britain, and Europe. Each carried its own vision of progress, yet all were bound by a shared hunger for innovation, dominance, and order. The story of the modern world is their story, written not in ink, but in steel, sweat, and sacrifice. It began when the British Empire extended its reach across the seas, creating the first true global network. Its ships carried not only goods, but ideas, language, law, science, and ambition, spreading them to every corner of the world. But every empire creates its successor, and across the Atlantic, a new power was awakening. America, built on the principles of freedom and opportunity, absorbed the lessons of its predecessors and transformed them into something new, an empire not of land, but of influence, industry, and innovation. While Britain ruled with tradition, America ruled with transformation. Europe, meanwhile, was the crucible of ideas, the birthplace of philosophy, art, and revolution. It had seen empires fall, borders dissolve, and nations reborn, yet its spirit remained unbroken. Out of its wars came wisdom, and out of its chaos came the will to rebuild. When the old world collapsed under the weight of its own ambitions, it was Europe that found strength in unity, learning that cooperation could achieve what conquest never could. Together, these three pillars became the architects of a civilization unlike any before. The Western Alliance was not formed in meetings or treaties. It was built through shared struggle, mutual influence, and the constant race to outthink and outbuild the rest of the world. As the Industrial Revolution swept across Britain, the world's pace changed forever. Steam, steel, and science became the engines of progress. Cities grew from smoke and ambition, and entire societies were redefined by invention. The telegraph connected continents, railways stitched together empires, and factories became the temples of a new age. America took these advancements and amplified them, turning innovation into identity. The Western world became a machine of momentum, constantly pushing, improving, expanding. Progress was not a choice. It was destiny. Yet behind every invention stood a philosophy, a belief that humanity could shape its own fate through knowledge, courage, and discipline. Wars tested that belief. 2 world wars shattered continents but also revealed the strength of unity. America's power grew as Europe rebuilt, and Britain adapted from empire to ally. Out of devastation came a new purpose, to protect not only borders, but ideals. Democracy, free markets, human rights, these became the new weapons of influence. The Western Alliance was no longer about who ruled whom, it was about who led the world forward. When the Cold War began, it was not fought for territory, but for ideology, and once again, the Western nations stood together, proving that shared values could outlast fear and tyranny. Technology became the new frontier. The West launched satellites, explored space, and built networks that connected billions. Industry evolved into information, and power shifted from armies to algorithms. Yet the essence remained the same: the relentless pursuit of progress, the drive to lead, to shape, to define. The Western Alliance, built on centuries of vision and sacrifice, continues to influence every part of our lives, from the freedoms we enjoy to the systems we depend on. Every invention, every alliance, every victory is a reflection of that spirit. the belief that the future belongs to those who dare to build it. The modern world is not an accident. It is the result of a legacy written by hands that refused to surrender to time, conflict, or limitation. Empires may rise through power, but alliances endure through purpose. And the Western Alliance was born out of necessity, not convenience. When the fires of war swept across continents and empires fell one by one, the world demanded something stronger than domination. It demanded cooperation. America, Britain, and Europe did not simply survive the storms of history. They learned to harness them. Each nation brought its own strength to the table, creating a balance that transformed competition into collaboration. Britain carried with it the wisdom of empire, the discipline of governance, and the deep-rooted belief that order sustains power. America brought energy, innovation, and the unshakable conviction that progress must never rest. Europe, fractured yet brilliant, contributed its resilience, its intellect, and its cultural depth. Together, they shaped not just borders, but the very blueprint of the modern world. After centuries of conflict, these powers began to understand that dominance was not the path forward. Partnership was. The old model of conquest had given way to a new kind of strength, shared vision. Britain's experience in diplomacy, America's drive for leadership, and Europe's hunger for stability became the foundation of a new age. The Western Alliance did not emerge in peace. It was carved from chaos. It grew stronger with every trial, learning that unity was more powerful than any army or empire. From the ruins of world wars, they built institutions that would preserve stability: the United Nations, NATO, the European Union, each one a monument to the belief that collective power could achieve what isolation never could. The world watched as the Western nations rebuilt faster, stronger, and smarter than anyone thought possible. Cities that had been reduced to rubble became centers of technology and trade. Economies once paralyzed by destruction found new life through cooperation and reconstruction. America's Marshall Plan poured resources into a devastated Europe, not to control it, but to revive it. Britain transitioned from imperial power to global partner, adapting to a new world where influence mattered more than territory. Europe turned its diversity into strength, creating alliances that transcended old rivalries. Together, they became the architects of recovery, setting a standard that inspired nations across the globe. The strength of the Western Alliance was not just political, it was ideological. It stood for democracy, for human rights, for the belief that individuals could shape their destiny. These ideas became the core of modern civilization, influencing education, economics, and culture around the world. The West did not simply rebuild, it reinvented what it meant to lead. Power was no longer defined by the number of colonies or weapons, but by the ability to innovate, to inspire, and to connect. When the Cold War drew its lines, it was the Western ideals that stood in contrast to control and oppression, proving that freedom could be mightier than fear. Technology accelerated this transformation. The Western nations pioneered the computer, the internet, and the digital revolution. Their universities became the factories of thought, their corporations the engines of invention. From London to New York, from Paris to Berlin, the spirit of progress became unstoppable. Culture became a form of influence. Music, film, fashion, language, all carrying the voice of the West to every corner of the planet. The Western Alliance did not conquer the world by force. It led it by example. Its power was built on values, not violence. Its unity was not uniformity, but understanding. The story of the Western Alliance is not one of perfection, but of persistence. It is the story of how nations once divided by war chose to define peace together, how rivals became partners, and how ideas became stronger than empires. Through shared struggle and unrelenting ambition, America, Britain, and Europe created not only prosperity, The Western world was not built overnight, nor was it built by chance. It was built through centuries of vision, endurance, and evolution. The Western Alliance emerged not from peace, but from conflict, from the understanding that unity was the only force strong enough to shape destiny. America, Britain, and Europe did not simply coexist. They pushed one another forward, forging progress through pressure. Each crisis became a lesson, each victory a foundation. Their alliance was not based on convenience, but conviction, a belief that civilization could be advanced through courage, creativity, and cooperation. The modern world as we know it was the result of this relentless pursuit of improvement, where innovation replaced conquest and knowledge replaced fear. It began with the British Empire's mastery of trade and exploration. The seas were not barriers, they were bridges to opportunity. Britain's influence expanded beyond geography. It built systems, institutions, and ideas that connected the world. Law, language, commerce, and science became the invisible threads weaving together distant lands. But across the ocean, America was rising, learning from Britain's strengths and its mistakes. It was a nation born from rebellion, but defined by ambition. Where Britain had tradition, America had energy. Where Europe had culture, America had drive. Together, they created a dynamic balance between heritage and innovation that propelled the Western world ahead of every rival. Europe, though scarred by centuries of war, remained the beating heart of culture and intellect. It was on European soil that the great revolutions of thought began. The Enlightenment, the Renaissance, the scientific awakening that questioned everything and redefined humanity's place in the universe. These ideas became the foundation upon which both Britain and America built their empires of progress. Europe, as pain became its power. Through destruction came reinvention. Through division came discovery. And when the continent once again lay in ruins after 2 world wars, it found unity in purpose, realizing that peace could be engineered just as industry could. The Industrial Revolution was the first great unifying force of the Western Alliance. Steam and steel erased distance, creating new possibilities for trade and transformation. Factories replaced feudalism, and machines replaced monarchies. This was the dawn of an age where invention ruled. Britain's mills turned raw resources into wealth. America's assembly lines turned dreams into reality, and Europe's thinkers turned chaos into innovation. The world had never seen such acceleration. In less than a century, humanity leaped from horse-drawn carts to engines, from handwritten letters to telegraphs, from local markets to global exchange. The Western Alliance had unlocked a new power, the power to shape the future itself. But power invites conflict, and conflict tests strength. The wars of the 20th century shattered illusions, yet reinforced the importance of cooperation. When the world seemed to fall apart, the Western nations stood together to rebuild. America's resources, Britain's diplomacy, and Europe's determination combined to create a new global order. They built systems to prevent chaos, institutions to preserve peace, and networks to promote prosperity. This was not the rule of one empire, but the leadership of many working as one. The Western Alliance was no longer a force of conquest. It was a force of construction. As the Cold War dawned, the struggle shifted from territory to ideology. The West faced a challenge not of armies, but of beliefs. Freedom versus control, innovation versus stagnation. The Western Alliance stood firm, driven by the conviction that progress must always serve humanity, not slave it. Out of this era came remarkable achievements: the space race, the digital revolution, and the globalization of information. The Western world led not because it was the strongest, but because the Western Alliance was not a creation of politics, but of persistence. not an agreement written by diplomats, but a destiny shaped by struggle. It was born in moments when the world stood on the edge of collapse, when humanity had to decide whether to destroy itself or rebuild stronger than ever before. America, Britain, and Europe became the torchbearers of a new age, not because they were perfect, but because they refused to surrender to despair. Their story is not one of conquest, but of creation, a story of how nations once divided by war learned to unite for progress, how chaos became the cradle of civilization, and how power, when guided by purpose, can rebuild the world. Britain was the first to understand that the true measure of power lies not in the land you control, but in the ideas you spread. Its empire stretched across continents, carrying technology, governance, and culture that would form the backbone of the modern age. It built institutions that valued reason and law, setting a standard that would later guide the world. Yet as Britain's global dominance reached its height, a new force was emerging across the Atlantic. America, young and restless, took the legacy of the old world and transformed it into something entirely new. It became the laboratory of ambition, the place where innovation met freedom. The two nations, though divided by history, shared a vision: to build, to advance, and to lead. Europe, the ancient heart of civilization, had endured more wars, revolutions, and rebirths than any other region on Earth. It was both the battlefield and the birthplace of modern thought. When its cities lay in ruins after 2 world wars, Europe did what it had always done. It rebuilt, reinvented, and rose again. It turned destruction into opportunity, forging alliances that turned centuries of rivalry into cooperation. The European Union emerged as a symbol of what humanity could achieve when unity replaced division. Its strength was not in armies but in integration, not in domination but in development. Together with Britain and America, Europe became part of a larger force that would shape global history, the Western Alliance, an idea that power must serve progress, and progress must serve humanity. The alliance was tested in every way imaginable. It faced economic collapse, ideological warfare, and cultural revolution. Yet, through every storm, it found renewal in resilience. The 20th century was their crucible, a century defined by conflict, but remembered for reconstruction. From the ashes of destruction came the dawn of democracy as the world's guiding principle. The Western nations invested not only in rebuilding cities, but in rebuilding hope. They constructed roads, schools, industries, and institutions that transformed the quality of life for millions. The alliance became not a symbol of dominance, but of determination, showing the world that cooperation could achieve what conquest never could. Science and technology became their greatest weapons, and knowledge became their most valuable currency. From the invention of the steam engine to the splitting of the atom, from the rise of the Internet to the exploration of space, the Western nations led with an insatiable drive to innovate. Their progress was not accidental. It was intentional, guided by the belief that advancement is the duty of civilization. Every discovery became a step forward, every invention a promise to the future. America turned imagination into industry. Britain turned structure into stability. Europe turned diversity into strength. Together, they built the framework of the modern world, a system where freedom fuels invention and progress feeds possibility. The Western Alliance did not merely change history. It defined what history could become. Its influence stretches beyond borders, beyond time, into every invention, every idea, and every freedom that shapes our lives today. It reminds us that civilization is not the work of a single. The Western Alliance stands as one of the most powerful examples of what humanity can achieve when vision overcomes division and purpose replaces pride. It was never planned, never perfectly designed, yet it became the driving force that built the modern world. America, Britain, and Europe together formed not just a coalition of nations, but a fusion of ideas that shaped every element of modern civilization. They proved that strength lies not in isolation but in integration, not in conquest but in cooperation. What began as survival through centuries of turmoil became a legacy of leadership, innovation, and transformation that continues to define the world's direction. The West did not simply inherit power. It created it through discipline, discovery, and determination. Britain's journey began on the oceans, where trade routes became lifelines and colonies became classrooms for empire. Its ships carried not only goods, but governance, spreading law, order, and education across continents. The Industrial Revolution turned its coal and iron into the engines of progress, creating a world where machinery replaced muscle and innovation became the new form of power. Britain's influence stretched far beyond its borders. It laid the groundwork for global connectivity, financial systems, and political frameworks that still guide the modern world. But its greatest contribution was not territory or trade. It was the export of ideas, of democracy, of progress, of perseverance. Across the Atlantic, America emerged as the next great architect of modernity. It was born from rebellion yet matured through reinvention. While Europe held on to its past, America looked only forward. It built cities that reached for the sky, industries that reshaped economies, and technologies that redefined human potential. In every era, from the age of steel to the age of silicon, America carried the torch of innovation. Its power came not from conquest, but from creation, from the ability to turn imagination into infrastructure and freedom into fuel for progress. It became the center of invention, entertainment, and influence, turning ideals into identity and leadership into legacy. Europe, the ancient soul of civilization, endured more than any continent should. Empires fell, borders shifted, and wars scarred its lands, yet each time it rose stronger and wiser. Out of its tragedies came transformation. The Renaissance revived art and reason. The Enlightenment redefined liberty and thought. The post-war era reinvented unity itself. Europe learned to build peace not through power, but through partnership. Nations that once clashed for centuries learned to cooperate, giving birth to a union that valued dialogue over domination. Its recovery after devastation was nothing short of miraculous, a model of resilience that proved progress can emerge from ruin when purpose leads the way. Together, these three forces built more than economies. They built ideals. They turned freedom into a system, innovation into identity, and progress into policy. The Western Alliance became the cornerstone of global order, creating institutions that preserved peace and encouraged prosperity. NATO guarded stability, the United Nations fostered diplomacy, and the World Bank drove development. The Western model became a symbol of aspiration for nations everywhere, representing the belief that liberty and progress are not privileges, but responsibilities. But the strength of the Western Alliance was never just in its institutions, it was in its mindset, the unwavering belief that humanity must keep moving forward no matter the cost. This belief fueled revolutions in science, culture, and technology. It created the airplane, the internet, the microchip, and the moon landing. It inspired generations to dream beyond limitations and reach for the impossible. From Shakespeare to Churchill, from Edison to Einstein, from the industrial age to the digital era, the Western world has stood as both the Western Alliance was never just a partnership of nations, it was a partnership of purpose. It showed the world that progress demands unity, that power means nothing without principle, and that civilization survives not through conquest, but through cooperation. The legacy of America, Britain, and Europe is written in every freedom we enjoy, every system we depend on, and every dream we dare to chase. They built the blueprint of the modern world, a world powered by knowledge, strengthened by resilience, and guided by the belief that humanity's greatest strength lies in its ability to build together. The story of the Western Alliance is not over. It continues wherever innovation leads, wherever courage rises, and wherever people choose to build rather than destroy. It is the living reminder that the future belongs not to those who wait for change, but to those who create it.